Hi, thanks for joining us for today's session of the Drawing Life Writing Workshop. Before we begin, I just want to take the time to say that if you don't want to miss the last session of this writing workshop, which is airing tomorrow, or any other future videos, click that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you'll know when any of our episodes go live. Well, let's go on with today's video. Session 2 recap. What did we learn in Session 2? Tips on writing first drafts, what is exposition, and using the 3-act structure to create a nice flowing story. Now, if you don't want to, if you haven't watched session 1 or session 2, I'll have the links in the description box below. But for now, let's move on with today's video. So before we jump in, I just want to give you a little warning. Editing is very laborious work. Brace yourself. Now, editing and rewriting. How do we edit our draft? You will need, first of all, Post-its, a ballpoint pen, preferably red, and a highlighter marker for highlighting scenes and words in your rough draft. And now, what I want you to do is to read and review your book, the rough draft that you have written, 3 times. The first time you read and review it, proofread it, look for grammar mistakes, typos, and everything like that. I find that I have like millions of typos in it, but I don't have as much now. I used to write by hand when I was writing for fun, but now with Word, they will give you like those little red things and you can go back and delete that. But the second time, after you have read and reviewed your book, the first time, read and review it again for the second time. This time, look for dialogue. Is there any dialogue that you think should be rewritten? Then again, for the third time, read and review your book. Character consistency. Now, one of the greatest examples I have seen of character consistency is by someone who runs a website named Now Novel. Now, this is a really great website. I would recommend it. Go check it out in the description box below. And she talked about character consistency, and she said this: if a character cannot swim in the beginning of the book, make sure that he's not surfing at the end of the book before you have explained how this change came about. So yeah, if your character cannot swim in the beginning of the book, make sure he's not swimming the Olympics in the end, unless this change has suddenly you have explained this change in some way. Now, the next thing I want you to do is to take a break. Take a break for, I don't know, a couple days. Then repeat those 3 steps. Actually, with the proofreading part, you don't really have to, but I would recommend repeating all the steps, just over and over until you feel satisfied. And then the last thing I needed to do, which is the hardest part of anything you're doing here, is to get feedback. Now, I'm very bad at getting feedback. When I get feedback and I feel criticized, I will just dump this. I feel like dumping the story altogether. So this is the hardest part for me. Let's go to the chalkboard. Get feedback from someone who has the skills to encourage you and at the same time criticize you. Now, I know this is hard because you may not have someone who has the skill to encourage you and at the same time criticize you, or there are 2 things that might happen to you. One, you may find someone who has the skill to encourage you and to encourage you alone, think that if he criticizes you, you will not be his friend anymore. Now, this is not the truth. You need criticism to make your story better. But then there are these people who only criticize you, and they don't, because these people who are creating these stories, they need to have a little bit of both, right? So if you have a story or anything, you could put it online or whatever, and see if you can put the link in the comment section, and I'll see what I can do to get feedback. So if you can't find anyone, you can come to me. But the next thing is, if you can't find anyone, take a long-term break, maybe a few days or maybe a few months, maybe a few years. Hide your draft and come back to it again, this time with fresh eyes. Now, I've learned this technique. The very first time I learned this technique was a couple years ago when I looked through the Comics for Beginners website. I've mentioned it before in this session, and come back to it again like in a few days or maybe a few weeks or months, and this time you will come back to it with fresh eyes. This has worked for me before. Now the next is to redo until satisfied. Do everything that I've told you before until you are satisfied. And then you can come back with a polished draft. Thank you for watching today's session of the editing of a novel. I hope you really found it interesting. I hope you found some good tips. And remember, if you need feedback, you can always come to me for a premise or a plot or whatever. And but just don't paste the whole story in the comments section. I'm just kidding. Put the link somewhere. Maybe you could put it on there's this thing that should, like, justpaste.com, and you can put it there if you want. But for now, I just want to say that we thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next session. The last episode of our writing workshop series is airing September 27, which is tomorrow. But until then, we'll see you in the next session.